I've explored several lunar-based concepts on this channel, including ESA's Moon Village, Sabrina Kerber's Haven Lunar Base, and the Diana concept. Today, I'm looking at NASA's Artemis Base Camp, a central part of their Artemis program that now includes a newly announced 100 kilowatt nuclear power plant as a key component. While NASA hasn't pinpointed the exact location, they've narrowed it down to sites near Shackleton and Dergelash craters, close to the lunar South Pole's peaks of eternal light, a region that sees almost continuous sunlight throughout the year, although with a nuclear reactor that now becomes less important. The base camp will be an international partnership, so I'll talk about the different contributions. First, we'll look at NASA's hardware, followed by ESA's and JAXA's roles. Seats on Artemis missions are allocated based on contributions to the Artemis program. This provides incentives for each non-NASA space agency to contribute as much as possible to get their astronauts on the moon's surface. First, let's go over the hardware NASA will be providing to support the Artemis base camp. NASA's contribution. NASA will provide crew and cargo transportation to the moon. Currently, the idea is for the SLS rocket, topped with an Orion capsule, to send crew to the Gateway station orbiting the moon. From there, crews transfer to a Human Landing System, or HLS for short, for descent to the lunar surface. NASA has selected two providers for the HLS, SpaceX with its Starship and Blue Origin with its Mark II lunar lander. It's not entirely clear if this current architecture will continue, as the new administration wants to scrap Gateway, SLS and Orion and use commercial heavy and super heavy lift launchers instead. Beyond transportation, NASA contributes a lunar spacesuit, developed through a competitive commercial process. Initially, Axiom Space and Collins Aerospace were selected, but Collins withdrew, leaving Axiom to advance the suit's development. Testing is underway with promising progress, ensuring astronauts can operate safely on the moon. And we can't finish NASA's contribution without mentioning that at least a 100 kilowatt nuclear fission reactor is to be placed on the moon's surface by 2030. While this is for geopolitical purposes, it will be very useful for the Artemis base camp due to the abundant amount of baseline power that will be available. This expands the number of activities that can be undertaken and the amount of equipment that can be operated. In terms of the habitat module itself, that will be provided to NASA by Italy. So let's look at that next, along with another useful piece of technology provided by Europe. ESA's contribution to the Artemis base camp. ESA, the European Space Agency, provides two pieces of equipment, the habitation module and a large cargo lander. It's worth noting that ESA already contributes to the Artemis program with the European Service Module for the Orion spacecraft, which provides propulsion and life support, and multiple modules for the Lunar Gateway, including the Lunar iHab for crew habitation, the Esprit refueling and logistics module with observation windows, and the Lunar Link for enhanced communications. These contributions have secured ESA 3 astronaut slots, 2 for Gateway missions on Artemis 4 and Artemis 5, with negotiations ongoing to obtain a lunar surface landing for the third. Let's now explore the habitation module in detail. Italy's Multipurpose Habitat, or MPH. After receiving approval from NASA in 2024, the Italian Space Agency signed a contract with Thales Alenia to begin the design of the Multipurpose Habitat, the key piece of technology for the Artemis base camp. This will be the first dedicated habitation module on the moon and will become the hub from which the Artemis base camp will grow over time. Technically speaking, the contract is between NASA and ASI, the Italian Space Agency, so this doesn't count directly as an ESA contribution. While this doesn't guarantee an Italian astronaut on a future Artemis mission, it puts them in a good position to ask for a slot given their contribution. The module measures 3 meters in width and 6 meters in length, with a mass of approximately 15 tons. One surprising element is that the habitation module has wheels, allowing crewed missions to relocate to various locations on the lunar surface. The module can accommodate 2 astronauts for 1 mission per year, with each mission lasting between 7 and 30 days. In emergencies, it can support larger crews for shorter durations. Once deployed on the Moon, it's expected to have an operational lifespan of around 10 years. The head of the Italian Space Agency, Teodora Valenti, said, "The future lunar module, the result of the historic relationship between NASA and ASI, is part of a long-term investment vision that Italy has implemented, enabling us to play an increasingly leading role in the new space race and, moreover, to be a fundamental part of the Moon-to-Mars strategy of NASA's Artemis program." Unquote. The design phase will span 2 years, with construction and a planned launch targeted for 2033. Next, we'll explore Europe's second key contribution to the Artemis base camp, ESA's Argonaut, a large lunar lander. To establish a base on the Moon, large payloads like Rovers, along with consumables, equipment and scientific instruments, must reach the lunar surface. ESA's Argonaut lunar lander meets this need, capable of delivering up to 2 tons of cargo to the Moon's south pole. Thales Alenia Space, under an €862 million contract with ESA, leads the design, development and delivery of the Argonaut's lunar descent element, the core component for landing. Scheduled for launch in the early 2030s, Argonaut will be Europe's main method for sending cargo to the Moon. Its first mission, Argonaut, will deploy navigation, telecommunications and energy generation storage systems to support exploration around the lunar south pole. The Argonaut spacecraft consists of 3 main elements: the lunar descent element for flying to the Moon and landing on the target, the cargo platform, which is the interface between the lander and the cargo, and finally the payload, which is to be landed and placed on the Moon's surface using a robotic arm or ramp as needed. The UK office of Thales Alenia Space is handling the propulsion component, while other parts such as guidance, navigation and control will be handled by the French and German offices. A separate procurement will cover mission operations and payload integration, ensuring Argonaut's role as a modular block in international lunar exploration. While most discussions might focus solely on the MPH and Argonaut, I want to spotlight a lesser-known space startup contributing to Artemis, one I've covered before but deserves more attention. French space agency CNES funds lunar power station prototype for Artemis. The French space agency has initiated a call for the development of a lunar power station prototype. It's part of what France calls its Spaceship France effort, which envisions a number of technical milestones, starting with a plug-in power station for rovers and other surface elements, followed by a storage shelter, and finally a habitat for astronauts. Spartan Space, a French space startup I covered on this channel before, is contributing to this effort. It's working on the airlock design, system studies, and the habitable version of the module, which is the third and final phase of the project. The French Space Agency calls this habitation module work the Lunar Integrated Shelter for Exploration, or LEASE initiative. The key technologies identified are energy generation, storage, in-situ resource utilization, and habitation. The first LEASE module, a lunar power station, will supply electricity to surface infrastructure. Designed for integration with ESA's Argonaut lunar lander, it is targeted for a flight in the early 2030s. The prototype must feature 4 standard power outlets delivering 2 kilowatts of power, operating continuously for 8 hours, and prioritize commercial off-the-shelf components for efficiency and cost. Spartan Space brings expertise from its EuroHab prototype and ongoing work on lunar spacesuit designs, strengthening its contribution to LEASE. Next, we'll explore Japan's contribution to the Artemis base camp. JAXA's contribution, the Lunar Cruiser Pressurised Rover. While NASA has contracted lunar rover services from US space startups, all these vehicles are unpressurized. This means the crew will need to wear a spacesuit at all times, which reduces flexibility and reduces operations to a maximum of 8 hours. Realistically, because NASA adds in large margins for safety, especially for crewed operations, is likely to be 6.5 hours at the most. Given the time needed to drive to a useful spot and drive back to the habitat, the maximum amount of useful time is very limited. A pressurized rover, on the other hand, allows 2 crew to work in a shirt-sleeves environment. The rover can support missions of up to 30 days at a time. It's rated, over its lifetime, for a total distance of 15,000 kilometers. That's 9,320 miles. The Lunar Cruiser, as it's called, is the Japanese Space Agency's main contribution to the Artemis base camp. It can be used as a mobile habitat, similar to the multi-purpose habitat from Thales Alenia. JAXA and Toyota signed an agreement in 2019 to build this sustainable lunar exploration vehicle. A key milestone for this project was in April 2024, when NASA and Japan signed an implementing agreement that tasked Japan with designing, developing, and operating the rover. NASA has agreed to launch and deliver the rover to the Moon via cargo variants of the Human Landing System, either Blue Origin lunar lander or SpaceX's Starship vehicle. This is part of a larger program that envisions a lunar society supported by the rover. In this graphic from JAXA, you can see a lunar farm habitat. The rover is targeted for deployment on Artemis 7 in the early 2030s. The Lunar Cruiser uses fuel cell electric vehicle technology for propulsion. It can reach a top speed of 10 to 15 km per hour, depending upon the terrain. It's quite likely that, until roads are built, it may need to travel more slowly given the low friction and gravity on the Moon. This pressurized rover from JAXA will be a critical asset for the Artemis base camp. Astronauts will be able to travel much further and do more science and surveying than is possible with an unpressurized rover, where the crew are severely limited in sortie duration due to the amount of life support offered by their suits. Before finishing, let's look at the new piece added to Artemis recently, the nuclear power plant, and how that affects the base camp and future lunar activities. Powering the Artemis base camp, nuclear, solar, and fuel cells. With NASA's planned 100 kilowatt nuclear power plant confirmed for the Artemis base camp, a key question arises. Will solar panels and fuel cells complement it for redundancy and backup? If so, could the nuclear plant be strategically placed in Shackleton Crater, where its power could drive lunar resource harvesting and processing? Initially, the base camp, comprising a single multi-purpose habitat and a lunar terrain vehicle, requires modest power. As operations expand, energy demands will grow, but the 100 kilowatt nuclear plant would be more than enough for early missions. Positioning solar arrays at the base camp near the South Pole's peaks of eternal light for near constant sunlight could power the MPH, freeing the nuclear plant for resource-intensive tasks. Locating it in Shackleton Crater, rich in potential water ice, would optimize in-situ resource utilization for mining and processing. Commercial-scale lunar mining demands massive amounts of power. Ethos Space Resources estimates that producing 300 tons of oxygen, enough to fuel a single Starship to return to low Earth orbit, requires 500 kilowatts and over 20 tons of equipment. This underscores the energy needs for serious ISRU, far exceeding initial base camp requirements. While the 100 kilowatt nuclear plant supports early demos, second or third generation power systems, likely in the megawatt range, will be essential for large-scale lunar mining. Perhaps a mix of power sources will be used for redundancy. Solar is already available and is cheap, but cannot provide large amounts of power. Fuel cell technology is promising, but it hasn't been deployed on the Moon yet, and nuclear fission power can provide large quantities of power, including in craters or permanently shadowed regions. Final thoughts. The next Artemis mission, Artemis 2, is set to launch in April 2026, making the first crewed lunar flyby since Apollo. Artemis 3, the program's first crewed landing, depends upon SpaceX's Starship completing a successful unmanned lunar landing demonstration. It's scheduled for 2027, but that seems very unlikely, given Starship's development challenges. Later missions are even more uncertain, especially since the US administration has made it clear it wants to scrap SLS, Orion, and the Gateway Station. Is NASA's Artemis base camp plan, starting with a single multi-purpose habitat supported by NASA's HLS landers, ESA's Argonaut lander, and a 100 kilowatt nuclear power plant, and later JAXA's Lunar Cruiser, well conceived? Does it strike the right balance for establishing a lunar foothold, with room for additional modules in the future, or does it lack the ambition needed for sustainable exploration? Share your thoughts in the comments section below. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this space video, consider buying me a coffee to help fund more episodes like this. The link is in the description. Space News Live is on Saturday evening or Sunday morning, depending where you watch from. The live stream is a great way for you to share your thoughts and opinions on the videos I posted this week, or on any space topic in general. I highlight the most thought-provoking comments on videos I've received, along with late-breaking space news and previews of upcoming content. If you've got the time, please tune in and say hi. Be sure to like and subscribe so you'll see our upcoming videos. We make videos every week covering the space industry, with an emphasis on the smaller space startups that aren't covered so well on other channels. See you soon.